Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here at the Pegasus Institute. So, by way of introduction, my company's name is Chocolate Mousse Media. Yes, it's Moose the animal, not Moose the dessert. It was founded in Ottawa, where I'm based, in 1995. I have a strict criteria for work, which I'll get into. It is what we call in Canada, if you're not from Canada, a social enterprise. If you're from India, it's like, it's a non-profit corporation. I mean, it's a corporation, but the idea isn't to make a profit. There's only one full-time person in it. That's me. So everybody that works for me is a freelancer that works for me around the world. And so I have zero overheads. It's a very international production process. On any given day, I might talk to half a dozen different countries, and my production is literally, as you will see, done around the world. So, what are my criteria for topics? First and most important, it must be oriented towards saving or improving lives. Secondly, it must be a difficult issue. If it's a very easy issue, I usually tell the client, find somebody else to do it. Third, that media can make a difference. Fourth, it needs behavior change, not just education. That's a big important point because a lot of what you might have seen, for example, every documentary filmmaker is producing something that's educational. But that does not mean it's behavior change. That's quite a difference. Education can be a component of behavior change that you want to create, but it must be oriented towards behavior change. And it needs individual behavior change. So as you'll see, I don't believe in groups. In the old days, marketing was done in groups. People want to sell me a jacket. They'll say, "Oh, he wears blue jackets." They'll market a blue jacket to me, whatever. I don't actually believe in groups. I believe very much. And so I always say I have an audience of one person, and I'll come to why that is. It needs innovation and no one else is covering it. I'll give you an example. I went to a conference on malaria prevention, and every NGO there wants to make its own media and wants to compete with every other media that's being created by other NGOs and governments. And there's a lot of overlapping. And I make sure that nobody else is covering the topic, and it needs cross-cultural media. That's the most difficult part about making media, and I will go through that very briefly. But essentially, I insist that we have cross-cultural media. And finally, as was mentioned earlier, it's available for free, wide distribution, or very intensive use in a country. So my log line, what is the log line of what I do? I say I better the human condition through human-centered media. And we'll come to that in a minute. So what is being human-centered? It is basically creating cognitive dissonance by human-centered behavior change communications. If you don't know what cognitive dissonance is, it's simply a way of putting into your brain an alternate way of thinking or of doing, so that you have two different ways. You have the way that you already know, and then I put in a different way, and it creates cognitive dissonance in your brain as to which you're going to pick. Now, this is not an easy thing to do because, and this is why I say I have an audience of one person, all of us carry around in ourselves different backgrounds and different ethnicities. So some people call them barriers to communications. I call them influences to communications, and I've listed some of them there. I actually have a list of 54 influences of communications that I go through. So every little thing that I've done, every drawing, every word in every script is measured against these criteria that I have to get around because my work can be used very locally or can be used on a global scale. So if you think on a global scale, how do you get around the fact that we all have different ethnicities and different genders and different stigmas in our brain? That's the important part of getting around and creating media that can be seen literally by a few billion people if they want to, even if you're a small, in a small setting. Let's say you're in a classroom in Canada, you will have people from different ethnicities in that classroom. You will have students from different places. You will have students with their own prejudices. You will have different religions in the classroom. So it doesn't have to be on a huge global scale. Even if you're just trying to teach in one classroom, you will have all people with all these influences. And because we have so many influences in our heads, I say that I have an audience of one person, meaning that every person is different. So for me, religion is not so important. For somebody else, religion might be extremely important. I don't think I have a bias against women, but and some people do have a bias against women. So because of this, because I have to get around all these factors, the way we have all of these in our brains is unique to ourselves. So there's no other person on the planet who either says, meaning gives, or receives, or interprets communications like you do. No other person on this planet. I have core principles. So my principle first is it's got to be people approach. It's got to be people centered. So my approach is always including on health, and I know most of you are involved or interested in health. My approach is human rights based. My approach is not to create unintended consequences. I'll give an example of this. In Bangladesh, I was invited to speak to create a national program on acid violence. Now, if you don't know what acid violence is, it's when a man, I've never heard of a woman doing this, it's when a man throws acid on a woman to disfigure her. And it's not intended usually to kill her, but to disfigure her. And I went to Bangladesh and I met with a lot of people and tried to figure this out. And finally, I said, I can't do it because I could not figure out how to prevent acid violence without propagating acid violence, without saying that there is something called acid violence and this is what it is. So I might have given a lot of men the idea of acid violence while trying to prevent it, which did not make any sense to me. So I actually withdrew from the project and never did it. And that's just one example. I can give you many other examples. My approach is never to instruct the viewer on how to think or act. This is a very important distinction that I have from other people who make media. Now, if you think of, I don't know, I'm going to show you an example later on, but if you think of a woman and you're trying to prevent gender-based violence against a woman, quite often media is created that shows a battered woman. I'm going to show you one of those, a battered woman. To me, why are you showing a battered woman? Because what you're doing is you're propagating violence against women, you're publicizing violence against women, and that's not your intended target. The target isn't the woman. The target in that case is the man who's beating up the woman. So a lot of this kind of media, I think, misses the mark. My approach is to never think that anything is impossible. I'll give an example. I did a whole series in the Middle East on universal values for a very well-known broadcaster that went to 27 countries in the Middle East in Arabic. Now, you can think of, somebody creating media that goes directly into households in Arabic on issues like gender equality between boys and girls, on issues like accepting other cultures. Well, we did it. We played it for 2 years and we didn't create a storm. So many media people probably said, no, I think that's impossible. I'm not going to do it. And we did it. And I have never said something is impossible to do. So my reach right now is over a billion viewers, as far as I know, and to the best of my knowledge. I've been used in 198 countries. It's over 5,000 media productions. And as was mentioned, over 80% of the world's population, there are no copyright notices on almost all my productions to maintain accessibility and no cost. So I always tell the sponsor, whoever that is, they create, is giving me the money to create this, there will be no copyright. And if they say, no, we can't do it without a copyright, I say, fine, find somebody else to do it. I want my work to be accessible at no cost to anybody on the planet. So here are the topics in health, and I'm going to pause here and let you read it. I have just picked out the topics that I have impacted one way or the other, created media on in health. So I'm just going to let you read this for a minute before I continue. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can pause it and then continue. Okay. So if you have particular interest in something, earlier, one of our participants was mentioning mental health and Afghan refugees. As you can see on mental health, I've just recently created quite a lot of work, actually, both animation and live action on mental health, particularly of Afghan refugees. Okay, so I'm now going to just play this. This is from the CBC National. If you're not Canadian, this might not mean anything, but it's the national news. And Peter Mansbridge, who was the anchor at that time, made some points which I thought were very relevant. I hope you can hear it.
It might seem like an impossible task. Find a simple way to teach young people around the world how to avoid AIDS. One message for people separated by geography, culture, and language. A Canadian animator rose to the challenge and has just won a prestigious Peabody Award as a result. CBC Arts reporter Sandra Amba has a look at the Three Amigos.
How could anyone
Meet Stretch, Slash, and Dick. Three amigos, three cartoon condoms, off to teach the world about the perils of unprotected sex. Animated characters might seem like kid stuff, but their message is dead serious.
It's a jungle out there. Carry protection. Stop the spread of AIDS.
Humor is a great way, a great medium of reaching young people.
And you never try.
These award-winning public service announcements are targeted at 16 to 24-year-olds.
Give me a break.
People who the producer says need to hear a warning that could save their lives.
Condom.
I'm trying to get young people to put into the back of their minds the fact that the use of a condom will stop the spread of AIDS.
Sports, jokes, and comic hijinks have helped make these PSAs universal. They've been translated into dozens of languages.
Sin condón, simplemente.
Cantonese, Mandarin, we did Urdu, Swahili.
At first, the sexual subject matter made some communities hesitant to help with the translations.
Telling them that this was a health issue and that thousands of people died a day of this disease. Many people were willing to come out and participate, especially the young students from university.
In this South African classroom, the amigos got lots of laughs. But more importantly, they seem to have made a difference.
They told us that in 1 year, they went from 14 million condom sales to 40 million condom sales to the next year and 56 million condoms. And that big jump from 14 to 40 is when the Three Amigos started on the South African Broadcasting Corporation.
We now reveal the exact location of Bikini Island.
Make a condom your amigo, a simple concept aimed at preventing a complex health issue.
Don't be forgetting your life jackets now.
Sandra Apma, CBC News, Ottawa.
Dangerous waters.
Okay. So I obviously use creativity. So what is creativity? Creativity is the ability to think differently by a mental process of original thoughts that leads to the creation of new ideas. But there's a big but. Creativity is a personal journey of discovery. Nobody else can impose it on you. It's a personal journey that you go through in creativity. So the most important question I would ask you to answer to yourself, you don't have to write it down, is what are you doing here? Why did you come to this video, or if you're watching it on YouTube, or why are you with us today? If you said something like it's to get more people to buy my product, or it's to get people to read my research on some health issue research that you've done, you're wrong. The answer should be that you're here because you have a story to tell. And that's basically what I do, is create stories. So what is storytelling? In a video for impact, it is communicating your vision to make your audience understand and internalize your message or messages. What I mean by that is nobody can impose a message on you. I believe that each person, I can only bring you the message. Each person has to internalize the message. So if you want them to use a condom to stop the spread of AIDS, I can't tell you to do that. I can only bring you to thinking about using a condom to stop the spread of AIDS. And then you have to make the decision that that is in your best interest, and in this case, in your partner's best interest, and therefore you're going to do that. So I'm going to give you one example. In this world, even today, professors, doctors, researchers create reports. They create reports on whatever they're researching or whatever the article they're writing. It is a fraction. The people who can read that report is a fraction, a small fraction of what you can do if you create visual media. The health community has not yet realized that we live in an era, a new era of instant two-way communications that is visual. It is not written. And so I'm going to give you an example of a video I created in, I think it's Malawi. And Malawi had created a very serious study called the Violence Against Children Survey. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. Why is this going back? And basically, nobody wanted to read the report. It was 180 pages thick. Nobody wanted to read it. It was a very important, very good study, but it's still 180 pages that somebody has to go through. So I created a short video that was played to decision makers in the country, and voila, they got engaged.
Malawi is tearing itself to pieces, literally. An epidemic of violence against children has become the social norm. 2 out of 3 children experience violence. 1 in 5 girls are sexually abused. 2 out of 3 boys experience physical violence. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 3 boys experience emotional violence. These shocking findings comes from Malawi's Violence Against Children and Young Women Survey VAX. This video calls for an urgent action agenda to put an end to this misery. No one should grow up like this. Sexual abuse before the age of 18. 1 in 5 females and 1 in 7 males experience sexual abuse. The abusers are often 5 years older than the victims, who are only 12 to 14 years old. Most children tell someone when they are abused, but less than 1.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here because unfortunately it would take several months for us to go through all of the work I've done. So I'm going to keep going, but that gives you an idea of how I took a report, this 180-page report, and created visual media based on it. And then all of a sudden people said, yeah, we'll watch the video, even though they didn't want to read the 100-page report. So why bother? I have never met this person. This is Claudia Evers, Médecins Sans Frontières Ebola Emergency Coordinator in Guinea. And she said during the height of the Ebola crisis, in the first 9 months, if people had been given proper messages, all this could have been prevented. Now, think of the implication of her statement. It's a startling statement that basically says when, ultimately 11,500 people in the West African Ebola crisis. I've also worked in other countries like the DRC on Ebola, but in that particular crisis, 11,500 people died. And the worry was that literally over 1 million people would get Ebola and die. And so the question, if you think of the implications of this statement, if people had been given proper messages, all this could have been prevented. You have to understand. Now, here is an actual poster. I removed the name. I don't want to embarrass anybody. But here is an actual Ebola poster, probably funded by the international community. I don't know. But it was distributed in this country and said, in English, call 117 if these symptoms develop. Okay, I don't know about you, but if you look from the top to the right and then come down, okay, what is the third person doing holding his head? Does he have a headache? Does he have a toothache? What is the fourth person sitting on the bed? I have no idea. What is the bottom lady? She's on the floor. What are these symptoms? You can't even understand the symptoms, let alone, that you have to call 117 if these symptoms develop. But this is typical. This is typical of what we do in the international community. We create brochures and we create posters. And here is a poster. Literally, if I would not know what to do, what some of these images mean. So let me show you what I did.
My dearest family, because you love me, I need you to stop, think, and listen. I am sick because this disease called Ebola lives inside me. This Ebola is not a curse. Ebola is a virus. Father, please tell others and save them. I'm sorry, Mama, for causing you this much pain. I know this could have been prevented. If only I had heeded the warning and not have exposed myself to the virus. No matter what people say, tradition kills and superstitious ways have no power to stop this Ebola. Father, our family's only hope is my isolation. Do not touch my skin, blood, my sweat, my saliva, and my soul close because I have the Ebola. Oh, Mama, I feel your loving eyes gazing at me. I feel the mighty love you have for me. I know you yearn to hold and care for me, to bathe your child in the cool shade of our home. But because you love me, Mama, I need you to be stronger than your tears. Support the scientists and the medical staff. They are our only hope. These are good people from around the world. They did not bring this sickness to us. They are risking their lives to help us defeat the virus and live. We put the illness, whenever it surfaces, to the experts. Honor me, brother, in this way, as I will do the same for you. And if I should lose this battle, honor me with a good burial, but make sure nobody touches my body. Father, do not allow greed to turn against wisdom. Brother, save our family's future. Sister, sing not of my suffering, sing of my courage. The courage of Mama gave us all. I know what I ask of you is the hardest thing you will ever do. That you respect my wishes. Fills me with massive pride.
So that was created in 17 West African languages so that we could get into villages in their own language. And here's the key. For the first time, I saw in Africa people passing it from phone to phone. It became very important on places like WhatsApp, where we created a WhatsApp group. And I mean, it had, I can't remember, but hundreds of thousands of people on it watching the video. And that kind of, it's visual media, it's compelling, and it gets the messages across. So I want to show you one which I've done much more recently, which is on managing and coping with stress. This was created for the International Rescue Committee in the US, and it gives you a completely different view of how you have to tailor the messaging to the audience, the potential audience. Now, don't forget, I keep saying I have an audience of one person, but there are many different techniques to use in creating this kind of media. And you have to be extremely cognizant of how you're messaging and what the messaging is to get the people to internalize it. So this is a completely different style of animation I'm going to show you.
Managing and coping with stress. What is stress? Stress is a normal reaction to various changes in life. Stress is both physical and emotional. People feel stress in their bodies through changes in sleep, appetite, energy levels, or general health. People also experience stress emotionally through feelings of fear, anger, excitement, or sadness. Stress can feel positive or negative, or a combination of both. For example, you might experience positive stress when planning a wedding or seeing your family for the holidays. Stress can also sometimes become overwhelming, which makes it hard to manage or cope with new changes. Signs of stress. Stress can affect your emotions and physical health. Your body responds to stress in different ways. Some common physical changes include change in your sleep schedule, feeling tired or having less energy.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there again. We simply don't have, we have 45 minutes, we don't have time to watch.
Managing and
So, you can contact me. I, many more videos on many topics, and I put out the ones on health if you're interested, and just say, well, my study is on this, so I'm interested in that. Send me an email. There's my email address. There's my phone number, and you can go to my website. My website does not have the videos. My website has explanations of them. If you want to actually watch videos that I've created or co-created, go to my Vimeo channel. And as was mentioned in the introduction, they're all available to you free of charge. I don't take any kind of information. I don't ask for your email. I don't ask for your name. You can just take it, use it, download it, use it in any which way without any restriction. There is no copyright notice on most of my work. So with that, it's a very, George Bernard Shaw said, that's a smattering of everything and a knowledge of nothing, but there you go.